Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News. If you did miss the Talking News last week, perhaps you're unaware that we did delay the opening of Millbrook House for a week as the weather had turned so cold, and with the government guidelines, which were regularly changing at the time, asking us to keep windows open for activities of more than 15 minutes, we felt that with the weather turning so cold, that delaying opening for a week was the sensible option. However, we intend to open again next week, so if you are attending an activity here at Millbrook House, please do dress warmly because we will be required to open the windows at least every 15 minutes to circulate the air. All of the actions that we take regarding COVID measures are put in place to protect the members and our volunteers and staff as much as possible, so thank you so much for bearing with us. I'd also like to thank everybody who takes the time to give us a call, to thank us and to pass comments on the newsletter and indeed the Talking News. These vital pieces of information that we produce so regularly are entirely for members, so it's so important to have feedback of people for things that we do right and things that we do wrong. So thank you everybody who takes the time to give us a call. So if you do have any comments about the Talking News or indeed the newsletter which comes out every other month, please never hesitate to give us a call. Don't forget, we also have an audio library which is CD based. It is completely free for members to use. If you would like to join, please don't hesitate to give the office a call on 522205 and we will be able to register you for the library. Wishing everybody a happy new year, with kindest wishes, Lisa.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled 2 Islanders Killed and Another Injured in Fatal Crash at Whippingham. 2 men in their 20s from Cowes have been tragically killed in a crash involving a car and a van at Whippingham, police have confirmed. Emergency services were called to Whippingham Road, the main road in and out of East Cowes, at just before 13:10 on Tuesday the 11th, following reports of a serious collision near the junction with Alveston Road. Police, fire and ambulance crews all arrived on scene to find 2 males in a Honda Civic in a critical condition and 1 injured male in a Toyota Proas van. 3 fire engines and an incident command unit were mobilised to the crash scene by Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. The Isle of Wight Ambulance Service also mobilised 3 ambulance crews, a rapid response paramedic and a number of senior officers. Sadly, despite the efforts of everyone involved, the occupants of the Civic, both in their 20s and from Cowes, were declared dead at the scene. Their next of kin have been informed and are being supported at this time. The driver of the van, a man in his 40s from Newport, was taken to St Mary's Hospital by ambulance with minor injuries. Island Echo is told by witnesses that the Honda Civic EJ9 was travelling towards East Cowes at the time of the collision, with the driver losing control and crashing side-on into the oncoming van on the opposite side of the carriageway. Specialist officers from the mainland-based Collision Investigation Unit have arrived on the island to piece together exactly what led to the fatal crash. Senior Investigating Officer, Police Sergeant Jamie Barron, has said, "This is a tragic incident in which 2 young men have sadly lost their lives. An investigation is already underway in order to establish the exact circumstances leading up to the incident, and our inquiries remain ongoing at this time. We'd like to hear from anyone who was in the area at the time and who may have witnessed the collision or the moments leading up to it. Did you see what happened? Do you have dashcam footage showing the collision or the moments beforehand? Thank you to local residents for their patience and cooperation as we dealt with this incident, having closed a number of roads for several hours surrounding the scene in order to carry out our inquiries. Any information you might have, no matter how small or insignificant you believe it to be, could really assist our investigation and help us to understand the final moments before this tragedy. We would urge anyone with information to please contact us on 101, quoting Operation Hostel, or reference number 442200 12949. Alternatively, you can submit information via the following link: https://www.hampshire.police.uk/tell-us-case-report/. The road has now reopened in both directions.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. Tide and time bell could be installed at Ventnor seafront if council grant permission for art installation. Ventnor is set to become part of a national bell community project with the installation of a piece of public art. A tide and time bell designed by international sculptor Marcus Vergette will be placed on Ventnor seafront if the Isle of Wight Council approves its planning permission. The bell will ring gently at high tide and be tuned to blend in with the sound of breaking waves, with a unique design for Ventnor. Words and design are inscribed on the bell, made out of a wave catch and clapper that would have significant meaning to the community. It is part of a national project that will eventually see 16 of the bells placed across the UK. Since 2009, 7 have so far been installed in Scotland, Wales, London, Lancashire and Devon. The bell for Ventnor would be around 1.6 metres tall and located at the bottom of the steps next to the rotunda bandstand between the high and low tide marks. It would be cast in marine bronze and have an estimated lifespan of 10,000 years. In planning documents, Sculpture South say the bells are a powerful catalyst for community activities, stimulating creativity while highlighting the threat of rising sea levels driven by global warming. The rise of water levels and the flow of water due to the tides moves the clapper to strike the bell and create gentle musical patterns. In its heritage statement on behalf of the applicant, Venture South, Rainey Petrie Architecture says it is hoped the bell will add to the development of the cultural scene in Ventnor by inserting a significant piece of public art into this unique and historic setting with its strong and lasting relationship with the sea. It is proposed, if the bell is installed, Ventnor Town Council would become its legal owner. To view the plans, you can visit the Council's planning portal. Comments can be made until the 4th of February.
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. Archdeacon of the Isle of Wight and Team Rector to move to new role. The Venerable Peter Leonard is to step down as Archdeacon of the Isle of Wight and Team Rector of Newport and Carisbrooke with Gatcombe, it has been announced. He will switch roles to work for a charity after almost 8 years working for the Church of England, 3 of which have been as the senior clergy person on the Isle of Wight. His final days working as Archdeacon and Team Rector will be on the 28th of February. Peter will become Chief Executive of Family Links, the Centre for Emotional Health, a national charity and training organisation dedicated to the promotion of emotional health at home, at school and at work. He has paid tribute to those he has worked alongside on the Isle of Wight and to colleagues in the Diocese of Portsmouth. He said, "It has been a real privilege to work alongside people in the island's churches and communities. It has been exciting to help to set up new projects, such as the team ministry covering Newport, Carisbrooke with Gatcombe, and I hope the groundwork has been laid for my successor there. I've enjoyed being part of the island community for the past few years and have been especially pleased to see it pulling together during the pandemic. I think island people have done superbly well to care for each other at a time of great stress and anxiety. It has shown off the island at its best. It has also been a joy to work with colleagues in the Diocese of Portsmouth, both at Portsmouth Cathedral and as Archdeacon. The commissary bishop of the Diocese of Portsmouth, the Right Reverend Rob Wickham, said, "The Venerable Peter Leonard has managed to bring together a number of significant responsibilities in the diocese with great skill and resilience. We will miss his questioning mind and his strategic and solution-focused energies in abundance. I hope you will join me in praying for him in his next chapter of serving Jesus Christ." Peter was originally ordained in 1997 and served as a priest in Guildford Diocese, then became a teacher and a head teacher before coming to Portsmouth Cathedral as a residentiary canon in 2014. He was acting Dean of Portsmouth before being appointed as Archdeacon of the Isle of Wight in 2019. In 2020, he also became Team Rector for Newport and Carisbrooke with Gatcombe after a parish reorganisation. His final Sunday as Archdeacon and Team Rector will be on the 27th of February. Peter and his partner Mark will then move to live on the mainland.
This is an article from Island Echo read by Terry. MP says proposed greenfield housing development in Bembridge not a serious site for development. Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley has joined the dozens of residents objecting to plans to build 57 houses on the outskirts of Bembridge, saying the site should never be considered as a serious location for development. In his objections to the plans, Mr. Seeley said he could not see how the development addressed local housing need and hit out at the developers, saying they would be the only ones to benefit from the development. He said if plans go ahead, the houses would put pressure on existing infrastructure, add to traffic congestion in the village, and posed a risk of flooding to existing properties. He said this specific site should never be considered as a serious site for development. The result will be endless urban sprawl to the benefit of developers and no one else. I met with Bembridge residents in the autumn to discuss the island's future housing needs, and they were very clear that they wanted to protect the village from this kind of large-scale, uncontrolled expansion. The development would not only harm the character of the village, it would put pressure on infrastructure and existing services, and it would do nothing to contribute to the housing needs of islanders. No development should be given the green light without due consideration being given to the wider impact on services and the community as a whole. Planning decision makers must take the needs of communities into account. It is their futures that will be affected. Mr. Seeley went on to suggest that there were other more appropriate sites that could be developed for new housing. There are other sites on the island that could be developed to provide affordable homes for islanders. The Isle of Wight Council has money from government to help it develop some of these, and it has opportunities to try to secure sites such as Camp Hill for housing. I would suggest that the council look at these first before considering supporting unsustainable, car-dependent greenfield developments such as this.
This is Alison reading an article from On the Wight entitled 5 Isle of Wight fire stations to become pop-up COVID-19 vaccination clinics. Details have been announced of the dates, times and locations for pop-up vaccination clinics being held at Isle of Wight fire stations over the coming weeks. A raft of pop-up vaccination clinics are being held across the Isle of Wight amid a fresh plea for everyone eligible to take up the offer of a COVID-19 jab. Solent NHS Trust is working in partnership with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service to offer clinics at fire stations, giving people an even wider range of opportunities to receive their first, second or booster vaccination. Further clinics will be announced in the coming days and weeks. Clinics will offer Pfizer vaccines only, and teams are providing first and second, after 12 weeks of the first dose, vaccinations for young people aged 12 to 15, as well as 16 and 17-year-olds. First and second, after 8 weeks of the first dose, vaccinations for people aged 18 and over. Booster vaccinations to people over the age of 18, 3 months after their second vaccination. The events will take place on Friday the 14th of January, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Freshwater Fire Station. Thursday the 20th of January, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Shanklin Fire Station. Saturday the 22nd of January, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at East Cowes Fire Station. Friday the 28th of January, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Cowes Fire Station. Monday the 17th of February, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Sandown Fire Station. Children aged 12 to 15 will need to attend a pop-up clinic or vaccination centre with their parent or guardian, who will be asked to give their consent. Children can get a first dose of the vaccine from the day they turn 12. Any 12 to 15-year-old who has tested positive for COVID-19 must wait 12 weeks before they can have a COVID-19 vaccine. This starts from the date of their positive PCR test. Angela Anderson, Solent NHS Trust's Clinical Director of COVID-19 vaccinations, said, "Our dedicated teams are working really hard to ensure we can offer the vaccine to as many people across our communities as possible. A big thank you to Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service for continuing to support the NHS vaccination programme. The COVID-19 vaccine is the best way to protect yourself and your loved ones from becoming seriously ill. We continue to increase opportunities to get vaccinated, so if you need your first, second or booster jab, please come to one of our pop-up clinics or walk into one of our mass vaccination centres." Assistant Chief Officer Stu Adamson said, "As a fire and rescue service, we have a responsibility to help protect lives and make our communities safer, and the vaccination programme is one of the most important ways in which we can do that right now. Our fire stations play an important role in the lives of the communities we serve, so we are more than happy to be able to help Solent NHS Trust again by opening our doors to the public. The stations will remain fully operational throughout, and this is a great opportunity for people who live nearby to take up the offer of a first, second or booster jab. In addition to the walk-in clinics at fire stations, more than 100 firefighters and support staff have volunteered to work as vaccinators or provide administrative support to the booster programme. Dr. Matt Nisbet, GP and clinical lead of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight COVID-19 vaccination programme, said, "It is fantastic news that there will now be even more opportunities for people to get their jab at pop-ups across the area. We are hugely grateful to Solent NHS Trust, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Services, local businesses, community centres and all of our colleagues, partners and volunteers for their continued support. The offer of a COVID-19 vaccine is not time limited, so anyone invited can have the jab, even if they have previously declined and changed their mind. Latest evidence shows that 2 vaccines do not give us the protection we need from Omicron due to the speed at which the variant spreads. However, a booster can restore protection to around 75%, so we strongly encourage everyone eligible to take up the offer of a booster as soon as possible. The Mass Vaccination Centre on the Isle of Wight continues to offer walk-in appointments for all doses between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. 7 days a week at the Riverside Centre, Newport. Vaccinations are also available at walk-in clinics provided by GP practices, outreach clinics, hospital hubs and pharmacies. People are also able to book an appointment through the national booking system. For more information, visit the website.
This is Brian reading an article from the Island Echo. Drink drive conviction for man whose car rolled down the hill and into stone wall. A ride man who had been drinking more after finding a dead body on his doorstep has been banned from driving after his vehicle rolled into a wall when he forgot to put the handbrake on. Joshua Vaughan, 24, of Nelson Street in Ryde, appeared before the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Tuesday, charged with 1 count of drink driving. The bench heard that during the early hours of Christmas Eve, 3 members of the public heard a loud noise when a white Audi A3 collided with a stone wall at the bottom of Nelson Street near the junction with Castle Street. Neighbours rushed out, but the driver was nowhere to be seen, and the keys were not in the ignition, with the handbrake in the off position. Police were called to the scene and conducted a number of vehicle checks, which identified that the insured individuals lived just up the road. The property was visited, and Mr. Simon Vaughan stated he had been in all evening, but that his son, Joshua Vaughan, had to be out. Officers noted that Joshua's speech was slurred and requested a breath test to be completed, which returned a reading of 51. Vaughan was arrested on suspicion of drink driving and taken into custody at Newport Police Station, where he gave an evidential reading of 50. Defending, Lee Peckham said that an unfortunate sequence of events had led to the situation arising. He explained that his client had been out drinking in Ryde on the night in question, but felt he was below the drink drive limit, therefore deciding to drive his friend home to Ventnor. He returned home, parked the car up and went inside to bed. Mr. Peckham said that the first he knew of the crash was when police arrived at his doorstep. It said that the handbrake was not applied and the vehicle rolled down the hill. Mr. Peckham told magistrates that Vaughan was not a big drinker, but in hindsight had been drinking more after finding a body on his doorstep in November. The deceased male had died from hypothermia. Magistrates, who noted Vaughan to be a valued member of society, handed down a 12-month driving ban and ordered Joshua Vaughan to pay a £346 fine, £85 costs and a £35 surcharge.
This is Chris reading an article from the Island Echo. Ride Pier Tram set to be launched at Steam Railway's anniversary event. A special event on Sunday the 23rd of January will mark the anniversary of the Isle of Wight Steam Railway's move from Newport to Haven Street, as well as the public launch of the newly rebuilt Ride Pier Tram. Back in January 1971, the Preservation Society were given just a few days' notice to move their precious locomotive, carriages and wagons from Newport station. There were significant obstacles to overcome. The line to Haven Street had laid disused and overgrown for 5 years, and a section of badly distorted track had to be negotiated at Wootton. On the day of the move, crowds of well-wishers lined the route, with a lucky few being able to travel aboard the last trains from Newport station. The Society's sole locomotive, W24 Calbourne, hauled 4 trains, with the motorised chassis of the Pier Tram being used to move water and equipment. 51 years later, supporters will be able to remember this significant day in the railway's history, with a guided walk along the old track bed and a special event at Haven Street Station. The Society's original locomotive and carriages will be in action. The anniversary event will also see the public launch of the newly rebuilt Pier Tram. Drury Railcar No. 2 was built in 1927 for the Pier Tramway. With its accompanying trailer car, it spent its entire working life shuttling between Ryde Esplanade and the pier head. A curious feature was that there was only one driving position, with the tram reversed up the pier, guided only by a wing mirror. Buffer stop collisions were not unknown. The Pier Tramway ceased operation in January 1969, and No. 2 was purchased by the Island Vintage Transport Group and stripped down to the chassis to facilitate its removal from the pier. It then played a key role in the steam railway's move to Haven Street in 1971, and early passengers were able to ride on this very curious open-topped vehicle. However, with significant repairs needed, the tram was abandoned in a field for 40 years. Interest resurfaced in 2011 with the aim of recreating this unique piece of island rail heritage. Having been extensively rebuilt over the last decade, it is now resplendent in its original Southern Railway livery and able to carry passengers along the steam railway's 5-mile line. Meticulous research ensured that the completed vehicle is an accurate recreation of the original. Riding on board is a unique experience for the 20 passengers, who can each enjoy panoramic views up and down the line from the large windows at each end of the vehicle. The rolling chassis of the replica trailer car has also been constructed, and the next phase of the project will see the body added so that the tram can operate as a 2-car set. If you would like to find out more about this event, then please visit the Isle of Wight Steam Railway website.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Jack Up Events launch retro chic glamping retreat near Ryde. The team behind the island's popular Jack Up retro music events are preparing for the launch of their new venture, Retro Staycations, after taking on the former Vintage Vacations site in Ashy near Ryde. Opening to guests at the start of April 2022, their 4-acre site at Hazelgrove Farm contains a fleet of beautiful American Airstream trailers dating back to the 1940s, 1960s, many with original fittings and fixtures. These classic caravans are currently in the process of being carefully refurbished to ensure a vibrant retro style that's subtly equipped for the 21st century camper. Owners Sarah Moss and Alex Dyke have said, "The global pandemic has given rise to a range of behavioural changes. Increasingly, people are seeking a taste of nostalgia and to escape the complications of modern-day life. Jack Up Events is centred around bringing back the music of yesteryear. Now we're offering the choice and chance to relive the glory days by giving people the opportunity to stay in an authentic, iconic American Airstream, the coolest caravan in the world. These are no ordinary classic caravans. Our sleek, authentic American Airstreams are the embodiment of retro style and sophistication. You often see these beautiful Airstreams on US film sets and backstage at Britain's biggest music festivals. However, in our pretty rural meadow just outside of Ryde, there's a small collection of them, each having its own individual personality and charm. The spacious site at Hazel Grove Farm in Ashey will also allow for a range of retro events and themed breaks throughout the year, as well as being a superb location for weddings and private parties. The family-run farm has a shop containing local produce including eggs, milk, beef, pork, and a wide variety of freshly picked vegetables. Guests will be able to pre-order delicious breakfast baskets with locally sourced ingredients grown and reared directly on the farm. Sarah adds, "The coronavirus crisis has brought everyone back to basics. This opportunity presents a natural synergy with our existing business model, not only via our love of all things retro, but it has always been Jack Up's ethos to benefit other local businesses. As well as supporting the farm, we've been able to provide welcome employment opportunities for several of the small businesses and freelancers who form a key part of our events. It's been a tough 2 years for the sector, and in addition to the odd weekend here and there, we're now able to offer continuous employment for 7 months of the year, whilst furthering relationships with local contractors and suppliers."
This is Alison reading an article from On the Wight entitled Floating Bridge. If mediation fails to result in fair and acceptable settlement, Isle of Wight Council will go straight to legal action. The Cabinet member says he will not comment on what the Council are prepared to do until the mediation process is over. A date has now been set for the long-awaited mediation process on the troubled floating bridge. A government report said parts of the vessel, which has been in and out of use since 2017, were potentially poorly designed, with several apparent design inadequacies. The Isle of Wight Council is entering into legal mediation with those who designed and created the floating bridge. As previously reported by News on the Wight, Wednesday the 2nd of March has now been announced for that to take place, but it will only be after the mediation has been settled that the Council will decide what its next actions will be. If the mediation does not result in a fair and acceptable settlement, however, Councillor Phil Jordan, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Transport, said the Council would not hesitate to instigate further legal action without delay. When questioned about a potential decision in March at Tuesday's Corporate Scrutiny Committee by Councillors Cameron Palin and Joe Robertson, Councillor Jordan said he was not commenting on what the Council are prepared to do until the mediation process was over. Councillor Palin, the Isle of Wight Association of Local Councils representative, had asked whether the authority was still on track to make a decision about appointing an independent organisation to manage improvement works or design a new bridge. Councillor Jordan said the Council will not say either of those things with a mediation process upcoming. A new floating bridge, however, was something Councillor Jordan and the new administration had not ruled out. News on the Wight reported this week on the steps that would have to be taken to replace the current bridge. The mediation process over the £3.2 million ferry has been continually delayed, with initial suggestions it would take place over a year ago under the previous administration. Since the Alliance administration took control in May, Councillor Jordan had previously said they had instructed officers to set a date in November last year, which turned into December and is now scheduled for March.
This is Brian reading an item from Isle of Wight Radio. 0-star hygiene rating for Sam's fast food in Ryde. Workers not washing their hands, a mouldy chopping board and the potential for dead flies in your food are some of the shocking standards at a Ryde takeaway. Environmental health officers from the Isle of Wight Council have slapped Sam's Chicken fast food restaurant and takeaway on Union Street with the worst score possible, finding urgent improvement was necessary. The Isle of Wight Council, however, says following the 0-star rating, it has worked with the operators of the premises to ensure urgent improvements were made. A council spokesperson said inspectors revisited the premises where standards were found to be greatly improved. One of the main issues the council found was the lack of hand washing at the establishment, with floury fingerprints on practically every piece of equipment and work surface throughout the kitchen. Officers saw staff handling raw chicken but not washing their hands before touching anything else. The wash-hand basin in the kitchen, however, was obstructed from use by a dustbin with chopping boards and knives placed on top of it. There was also no readily available hot or warm water or materials for hygienic hand drying. Overall, inspectors remarked there was a poor standard of hygiene, with the handles of fridges throughout the kitchen covered in food debris. A microwave inside was rusty and dirty, incapable of adequate cleaning, and one of the chopping boards was badly scored and ingrained with mould. The seal of the chip freezer also had mould growing on it. Food residue was spilt on the shelves in the chicken fridge, and raw meat was found being stored next to and above ready-to-eat foods in the walk-in chiller. Behind the cookers and fryers, inspectors saw the floor was covered in grease and old food debris. In a potential risk of food poisoning, no checks were being made or documented to confirm the chicken was being cooked at 75 degrees centigrade or above. There was also a risk of physical contamination, as blue gloves were found turned inside out in the tray of flours and crumbs used to coat the raw chicken, and the wire of the food temperature probe covered in carbonated food debris and grime. Inspectors also noted an electric fly killer was above the bread toaster and chopping board, which they said may lead to the contamination of food by dead flies. The establishment can request a re-inspection from the council at a cost to improve its food hygiene rating if they have improved their standards.
This is Chris reading an article from On the Wight. Cross-party councillors join forces to tackle litter and fly tipping problems. Councillor Bacon says it's annoying to see general waste bins with dog poo bags placed next to them when they can actually be put into the bin. On Monday, a cross-party group of councillors commenced a series of meetings to consider fly tipping, litter and related problems on the Isle of Wight. The group aims to produce a report and action plan later in the year to ensure that the Isle of Wight Council deals as effectively and efficiently as possible with the problem of fly tipping on the island. Statistics show that the island actually has one of the lowest rates of fly tipping activity in the southeast of England, and that fly tipping rates on the island have remained fairly constant for the last few years. The main problem the island suffers from, as with many other authorities, is fly tipping on the highway. The group considered existing powers and found that while these generally appear adequate to deal with fly tipping issues, the procedures that exist need to be simplified and communicated better to members of the public so that when problems arise, they can be dealt with more quickly. Susie Ellis, Ward Councillor for Central Rural, said, "A particular issue that was considered was the appropriate disposal of dog waste. There is a lot of public concern about dog poo not being disposed of properly. And whilst we would like to thank the many dog owners who currently deal responsibly with dog poo, we would remind residents that dog poo can be disposed of in any general waste bin, including your black bin at home. The quote is, 'Bag that poo, any bin will do.' It is encouraging to see that we are already doing well when it comes to fly tipping and litter. With improved procedures and better public communication, I hope that we can do even better for our island. We all have a responsibility to care for our environment." Jonathan Bacon, Isle of Wight Council Cabinet Member for Environment, Heritage and Waste, said, "We have a lot of good practice on the island, but we can still improve the system dealing with fly tipping on the island. We need to develop the system so that it is easier to understand and engage with it. We also need to work on public education. The Any Bin Will Do campaign is a prime example. It is annoying to see general waste bins with dog poo bags placed next to them when they can actually be put into the bin. I'm looking forward to the group producing a report that will help deal with these and other issues and help enhance the streets and countryside in our island biosphere."
This is an article from Isle of Wight Radio, read by Terry. Southern Vectis names the Wild Heart Trust as its corporate charity for 2022. Southern Vectis has announced its 2022 Charity of the Year as the Wild Heart Trust. The local bus operator will spend the year raising funds and awareness to help the trust, which runs the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary in Sandown. The Wild Heart Trust is a registered wildlife charity dedicated to providing forever homes for vulnerable rescued animals, which include everything from lions, tigers and monkeys to lemurs, reptiles and hedgehogs. It also campaigns to secure the future of some of the world's most threatened species, while preserving natural habitats that are under the threat of destruction. Southern Vectis General Manager Richard Tildesley said, "With welfare top of the agenda at the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary, this is an important initiative. We're proud to have it within our community here on the Isle of Wight. To start this new relationship, Southern Vectis covered the rear of one of our buses with the charity's branding, and we are offering the Wild Heart Trust the opportunity to have branding on board the buses with an easy donate QR code to help raise awareness and funds." Lawrence Bates, Chief Operating Officer of the Wild Heart Trust, added, "We are incredibly grateful to Southern Vectis and their employees for making us their Charity of the Year. The support of Southern Vectis and their passengers will be vital in our ongoing mission to provide refuge for vulnerable, rescued animals and giving them the chance to flourish in our sanctuary.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled Recycled Christmas Trees Raise £1,025 for the Donkey Sanctuary. The recycling of over 130 Christmas trees by TDG Tree Services has raised £1,025 for the Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary. Households were once again able to book to have their tree collected and responsibly disposed of in return for a small donation. Isle of Wight-based People Matter Isle of Wight received a donation of £500 from TDG Tree Services following the success of 2019's service, with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Air Ambulance receiving £800 in 2020. Now it has been revealed that 2021's efforts have raised a record amount, with over 130 trees chipped and recycled, despite the terrible weather over the weekend. The team at TDG have said, "This has been the most successful year yet. We didn't think we would beat last year's total, but the fantastic island community proved us wrong. We really appreciate all the generous donations, and we know the donkeys will too." All the chippings will be donated to attractions and parks across the island.
Hello, this is Madeline.
And this is Pauline.
Before we start the second part of the county press, here is this week's society news. The swimming group at Medina will restart on Monday. The cost is £5 for swimming. Transport is available if requested. Swimming is between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m. If you would like to join, please call the office on 52205 for more details. Coffee and Chat will restart on Wednesday the 19th of January at Millbrook House, 10 o'clock till 11:30. Only £1 for cake and coffee. Please come along for a chat and members of staff will be there for any assistance with equipment and information. The book group scheduled for this week has been rearranged for this Wednesday, the 19th at Millbrook at 2 p.m. If any member would like to join this group, you are very welcome to contact the office. The group is free of charge and books are supplied on CD or USB.
The West Wight swimming will restart in February and more details will follow. On Thursday the 20th of January, our Mix and Mingle group will restart and with an exciting programme for 2022 to look forward to. Members are required to book as numbers are limited. For more details, please call the office. Our monthly striders will restart on Friday the 28th of January. If you'd like to join this active group who walk once a month for an enjoyable stride between 4 and 6 miles, followed by a pub lunch, please call the office for more details. The cost is £3 plus transport if required. Please note lunch is extra. Please remember, if you are feeling unwell or have a temperature, do not attend any activity at Millbrook House. We want to protect both staff, volunteers and fellow members. Now we have a message from Terry Mitchell. This week we are very short of wallets to send out. Please make sure that you do send your blue or red wallets with its memory stick back each week to ensure you continue receiving the talking news.
Now we're moving on to the letters from the county press. And this is from N. Butcher in Freshwater. Drug Truths. Over Christmas I binged out and watched the Netflix series Narcos, Narcos Mexico and El Chapo, which told the story of the drug lords and narcotics trade in Colombia and Mexico. The Americans didn't really wake up to the problem until it became a serious issue. As they began to tackle and close down the trafficking routes, the cartels moved to shipping their product to other countries and continents. What was staggering was the level of corruption within government and police forces. They say if you sample Thames water, you'll now find traces of cocaine, and that the drug trade in the UK is fueling knife crime. Indeed, such is the problem that some inner-city schools now have guardians at the school gates to protect children that might be vulnerable. At the moment, our diminutive Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who likes to talk big and tough on numerous issues, but lacks the punch when it comes to solving any of them, is hyping her headline-grabbing knife crime bill, which many experts say isn't needed because sufficient laws already exist to deal with the issue. We also currently have a head of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, who seems remarkably reluctant to investigate issues of public concern if they involve the powerful and influential. I wonder why. It's easy to go after the little people, youngsters who are recruited as street dealers and are stabbing each other in turf wars. But if you genuinely want to tackle the problem, you need to cut off the supply of drugs and go after those who are enabling and protecting the individuals at the top of the chain. Don't tell me the authorities don't know who these people are or how large quantities of narcotics are entering the UK. Of course they know. They simply lack the willpower to go after them and close down their operation, which poses the question, why?
Is it time for Ryde to have its own sewage treatment works? A letter from Paul Martin, who's a retired marine engineer of Ryde. I was interested in Matthew Chatfield's fascinating article, Ryde Works, Why Did the Sewer at Apley Fail? During this summer, a small group of Ryde residents had the good fortune to speak informally with a sewage treatment expert sent to Apley to help diagnose and repair the leak. He informed us a pipe dealing with the wastewater was only just managing to deal with a greatly increased volume of sewage since the system was commissioned. With the large amount of housing being added to the area, he was concerned that, in his opinion, the system will be overwhelmed within 2 years. This was without the higher rainfall being experienced these recent years. The pipe repair, being dry-lined, would only decrease the volume being able to flow through it. It is my belief that the time has come for Ryde, having the largest population on the island, to have its own sewage treatment plant, with screening and maceration, but also ultraviolet tertiary treatment. This is required if the island is to continue to rely on tourism, especially as we are being encouraged to have staycations.
Where's the NHS money? From Robert Swinton of Ventnor. I can still picture Boris Johnson standing in front of that big red Conservative battle bus promising an extra, yes, extra 350 million a week, yes, week, for our NHS. Of course, we left the EU a year ago on January the 31st. Isn't it wonderful that our NHS has received an extra, yes, extra £17.5 billion? What? Do you mean it was a total lie and our NHS hasn't received anything like an extra 17.5 billion? Surely not.
And back on the subject of sewage, we have a letter from Tim Jeffries of Cowes. I refer to your article, Could Isle of Wight's Sewage Dumping Problem Be Solved?, detailing Southern Water's assurances that the island will be subject to an accelerated improvement programme. If we are to take these assurances from Southern Water at face value, then this is very promising news indeed, and I thank our MP, Mr Seeley, for following up on the meeting he and councillors Andre Bacon, Jarman and Quigley had with Southern Water last year, and his continued diligence on the island's behalf. What concerns me, though, is the language used in relation to these commitments seems deliberately vague enough to ensure that these commitments are neither binding or enforceable. I readily admit that I haven't seen the letter from Southern Water to Mr Seeley, but I would be very interested to understand the proposed metrics that are going to be employed to gauge the value of these commitments. To this point, I note Southern Water's use of a percentage when detailing their proposed works, which is deliberately ambiguous and offers something less than a measurable commitment. In the last year alone, there have been more than 320 discharges along the island's beaches by Southern Water, most notably the beauty spot of Gurnard, where, according to Surfers Against Sewage, more raw sewage has been discharged than on any other beach in the country. So, for Southern Water to insinuate that these discharges are connected to their ability to manage excessive rainfall in Sandown — by the way, there were less than 100 days of rainfall on the island last year — could be construed as highly disingenuous. Additionally, the new environmental bill only requires very gradual annual improvements from all of the water companies, and if Southern Water falls short of their assurances to our MP and the island to implement an accelerated plan, what will the consequences be? I'm fully supportive of these proposed improvements, but I have to remain sceptical of any organisation that is happy to take 9-figure fines on the chin, £126 million in one case alone, as it's cheaper than correcting the issues that impact their customers and the environment. Make no mistake, Southern Water know how to play the PR game very well, and I suspect will continue to do so.
And this is from F. Bell at Seaview. A socially distanced gathering is not a party. Neither is a gathering where the host doesn't provide the drinks. All this supposed angst over lockdown is complete nonsense. For as many people who pretended to be devastated they couldn't meet up with family, there will be twice as many who were absolutely delighted they didn't have to visit relatives. There is no case for number 10 Downing Street to answer. It's all spurious nonsense and politically motivated mischief. Just move on and focus on the future, not waste time and energy on the past.
Dan Bloomer of Ryde. Yay! The James Webb Space Telescope is now fully deployed with its mission to understand the beginnings of the universe. While back here on Earth, we're focused on getting back to normal, busily destroying our planet.
More questions raised on GP referrals from Matt Weaver in Cowes. Your letter, Unacceptable Referrals, in last week's edition raises more questions than answers. I personally do not have a major issue about my medical data being shared with third parties if it might benefit others or indeed assist in my own treatment, but that said, I recognise it would be nice and only polite to be asked. There will of course be many other patients who, for perfectly reasonable reasons, do not wish their personal medical history to be shared with third parties. With waiting lists for treatment already unacceptably long and elective surgeries yet again put on hold while theatre and support staff are redeployed helping with COVID and staff absences, if patients opt out of data sharing, will this mean they will wait even longer for elective treatment? The new integrated care providers, that's private companies providing healthcare on behalf of the NHS using the NHS logo, now have a seat on hospital boards and will be dividing up lucrative contracts to provide services conveniently in secret behind closed doors. Under-resourced NHS trusts, crippled by staff shortages, will be desperate to treat patients and have little option other than to embrace whatever IPCs offer in the way of support. Will patients opting out of data sharing become second-class NHS patients placed at the back of the queue? If so, does this amount to an insidious form of intimidation and bullying, where NHS patients are penalised if they are not prepared to allow their personal medical data distributed among third parties? Once this information is held in the private sector, what assurances are there it won't be monetarised and traded to other third parties here and abroad? There are many unanswered questions amid a worrying lack of open public debate. Perhaps there is absolutely nothing to be concerned about, or perhaps there is, who knows? One feels a growing sense that we are owned, or our personal history is, by an increasingly arrogant establishment, and it is there to be exploited at will in whatever way is seen fit, rather than our politicians and leaders being there to serving us. Perhaps people are simply seen as a commodity to be exploited. When one thinks back in history, say to the slave trade, hasn't that always been the underlying British mentality and establishment view?
And this is a letter from Malcolm Thorpe of Bembridge Harbour Authority and Bembridge Investments Limited. There appears to be confusion regarding the legal claims submitted to the High Court by Bembridge Harbour Trust, BHT, over the past 9 months or so. The present day situation is very straightforward. Mr Gully and his BHT lobby group have asked the High Court in 2 separate judicial review challenges to deal with 17 separate issues. Collectively, the High Court have ruled against BHT on 16 issues, with 1 issue still to be dealt with. Costs have already been awarded against BHT on 10 of these issues and are unpaid. The last remaining issue is BHT's request to have access to the full trading accounts of Bembridge Harbour Authority, BHIC. BHT has requested these many times since we bought the harbour business a decade ago and has been consistently refused. Such detailed accounts are prepared for the use of shareholders and not for third parties. BHT is not a shareholder. Mr Gully has made use of other people's money to completely finance all BHT's legal costs, while stating in legal documents that neither he nor his fellow trustees will dip into their own personal pockets. We're fully aware that such legal matters with solicitors and barristers are hugely expensive. This is especially true in BHT's case following losing their first court challenge and subsequently appointing a second set of barristers in an attempt to achieve a positive result. As a direct result, substantial management time of both Bembridge Harbour Authority and its sister company, Bembridge Investments Limited, has been involved, plus significant cash resources from both companies for legal costs.
And from Robert Swinton, again in Ventnor, no excuses. Will I apologise for the impression? I was speeding, I was stealing, I was off my face on drugs, etc., etc., become the stock phrase used by those who find themselves in front of magistrates up and down the country?
And our last letter is from J. Gibbons of Ryde, and this is to do with the cone at St Mary's Hospital. The page 3 story from last week's County Press tells us of charitable funds having helped to spruce up the entrance to St Mary's Hospital. The charity has swallowed a camel and strains at the gnat, as it clearly shows by the photo with the story. The huge monstrosity that spoils the view, whether from outside or inside, the cone is still there, offending the eye. If the charity's concern were to appeal for funds to move this thing to a more suitable place, perhaps Lynn Bottom in Bridlesford Road comes to mind, I and many others will gladly contribute. Now we move on to the Wight memories, and this is Tram to Star at Steam Railway Anniversary. A special event next Sunday will mark the anniversary of Isle of Wight Steam Railway's move from Newport to Haven Street. The team at the station railway had planned a celebration on the 50th anniversary in 2021. However, the national lockdown intervened and supporters were restricted to watching events from Haven Street via the webcam, and so a special celebration would be held this month. In January 1971, the Preservation Society was given a few days' notice to move their locomotive, carriages and wagons. The move came with obstacles to overcome, as the line to Haven Street had laid disused and overgrown for 5 years, and a section of poor track had to be negotiated at Wootton. Crowds of well-wishers lined the route, with a lucky few travelling on the last train from Newport Station. The Society's sole locomotive, W24 Calbourne, hauled 4 trains, with the motorised chassis of the Ryde Pier tram being used to move water and equipment. Demolition started soon afterwards, and the site of Newport Station is now the town's bypass and nearby retail park. Many may still be able to remember this day in the railway's history, and 51 years later they will have the chance to recall it with a guided walk from Newport along the old track bed and a special event at Haven Street Station on January the 23rd. The Society's original locomotive and carriages will be in action, and the anniversary event will also see the public launch of the newly rebuilt Ryde Pier tram. Drury Railcar No. 2 was built in 1927 for the Ryde Pier tramway, spending its entire working life shutting between Ryde Esplanade and the Pier head. A curious feature was that there was only one driving position, with the tram needing to be reversed up the pier, guided only by a wing mirror. The Pier tramway stopped operation in January 1969 and number 2 was purchased by the Island Vintage Transport Group, stripping it down to the chassis to facilitate its removal from the pier. It then played a key role when the steam railways moved to Haven Street in 1971, and early passengers were able to ride on this very curious open-topped vehicle. However, with significant repairs needed, the tram was abandoned in the field for 40 years, with interest resurfacing in 2011 with the aim of restoring the unique piece of island rail heritage. Having been rebuilt over the last decade, it is once again sporting its original Southern Railway livery and can carry passengers along the steam railway's 5-mile line. Riding on board is a unique experience for the 20 passengers, who can each enjoy panoramic views up and down the line from the large windows at each end of the vehicle.
And from Rebecca Rancaroni, hoping New Year brings an end to COVID crisis. There's something symbolic about January the 1st. A new year, a fresh start. This time it feels different. COVID has dominated our lives for nearly 2 years now, and I'd lay a bet most people's wish is simply that it ends. I hope that the vaccination rollout has done its job and people can breathe freely again and hug those they love after months and in some cases years apart. It's been hard. I hope with every part of me that 2022 brings us a kinder, less anxious time, with freedom to go where we want, when we want, without the very unwelcome COVID family curtailing our everyday lives. At least 2 years down the line, we know much more about COVID, how it spread, who's most vulnerable, best precautions to take. And I still marvel at those who still went to work when COVID first appeared, when we knew so little about transmission, and literally put their lives on the line in order that people could still buy food, medicines, have rubbish collected, hospitals, care homes, and many, many others. A lot of these people on minimum or low wage doing essential work which kept the rest of us going. They are true heroes. Perhaps one of the good things that will come out of this pandemic is that people who are at the backbone of our country are treated with the respect and salary they deserve. We know for sure who the essential workers are now, and frankly, none of them work in Westminster. They work in St Mary's, Morrison's, water treatment works. Society would grind to a halt without them. I don't think we'd miss the suits much at all, not for a very long time, if ever. COVID and keeping people safe has meant that many care homes and hospitals have placed draconian restrictions on their patients, residents, visitors. It's understandable that institutions want to keep their inmates safe. But physical safety is not the only important factor at play. Human beings need connection, they need touch. Humans need their loved ones around them when they are at their most vulnerable. A hug and a chat can have an enormous therapeutic benefit on a person's health, as well as their morale. To stick an arbitrary number on the total amount of named visitors allowed to visit seems unkind to both the inmate and their family. On a purely logistical basis, unless all staff within the hospital, care home are staying on site, isolating, then the staff will be going home via the supermarket possibly, to kids who've been at school possibly, to partners who've been at work, etc. Every member of staff will be coming into contact with hundreds, if not thousands of people through people. So why restrict visitors to only a few named ones? If people are vaccinated and have a negative lateral flow test, then let them come in and let those with so little choice have a cuddle. Happy 2022, everybody.
And this is a message from our new superintendent, Hampshire Constabulary. By way of introduction to County Press readers, I am Superintendent Jim Pegler, and I have this month been appointed the role of District Commander for Policing on the Isle of Wight. I follow in the footsteps of Superintendent Sarah Jackson, who did a fantastic job of leading the island's police service for 6 years before her departure at the end of December 2021. I feel very privileged to be your new District Commander. The island is such a unique and beautiful part of the world and a fantastic place to live and work. I'm already keen to get to know the island, its people, and the brilliant police officers and staff who work here. As the District Commander, I will be focused on ensuring that police on the island are delivering the best possible service to you, the public, and ensuring witnesses and victims are supported. Crimes in any community are generally committed by a tiny minority of individuals that have a disproportionate impact on others. I'm determined to identify the people responsible and will commit to stopping their criminal activity by proactively investigating and prosecuting offences, as well as exploring appropriate diversionary opportunities, particularly for younger people. I want the communities here to know that I will be listening to your concerns. I want to know about the issues that are affecting you most, so I can work with the teams here to respond to these. One of our current priorities on the island is preventing, reducing and tackling perpetrators of a domestic abuse. The disruption of Class A drugs network is another of our priorities, and I'm told of the excellent proactive efforts that have already been carried out previously by local teams who work hard to plan and carry out warrants, arrest drug suppliers and gather intelligence. I am committing to maintaining this momentum and ensuring this great work continues to happen. I've mentioned previously that I want to hear about the concerns you have about crime and antisocial behaviour in your neighbourhood, as this helps inform our priorities and where we need to be targeting our resources. Policing works best when our officers and staff communicate and engage with the community, build strong partnerships with other key agencies, and we all pull together in the same direction to prevent and detect crime. I very much look forward to meeting and working with partners, volunteers and members of the public here on the island, and will continue to keep County Press readers up to date with the latest policing news.
Now moving on to some entertainment. Wight Proms concerts have something for all. From Prince Charles's harpist to the delights of Paddington Bear, there is something for everyone in a new series of monthly concerts. Organisers of the Wight Proms Festival, held annually in August in Cowes, have launched Wight Proms Wednesdays, which will start next month. The idea is to bring their audience a bit of the Wight Proms throughout the year, not just in August, so they have launched a series of lunchtime concerts. Taking place monthly at 12:30 p.m. on 5 Wednesdays, each lasting 40 minutes, they are the ideal lunch break edition, taking place in the ballroom at Northwood House. People who would like to go to all 5 events can buy tickets for the price of 4. Ride pianist Thomas Luke, winner of the BBC Young Musician Keyboard Final, starts the series on February the 16th. On March the 2nd, it's the turn of vocalist Thomas Cameron, a Brit-nominated classical crossover tenor. West End leading man Daniel Boys will perform on May the 11th. On June the 8th, harpist Anne Denholm, a former official harpist to the Prince of Wales, will entertain. On July the 13th, pianist James Longford, a Steinway artist and award-winning pianist from Ryde, will perform the final concert of the series. There are also 2 family concerts on April the 13th. Both concerts are billed as a wonderful way to introduce classical music to younger children, whilst also entertaining the adults, featuring a live wind quintet consisting of flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, French horn and narrator. They will both take place at Trinity Theatre in Cowes. The first at 11 a.m. is Peter and the Wolf, and the second at 2 p.m. is Paddington Bear's first classical concert. Tickets are now on sale at www.wightproms.co.uk. wightproms.co.uk/Wednesdays. The Wight Proms 2022 Annual Outdoor Festival will take place from August the 18th to the 21st, celebrating opera, comedy, musical theatre and of course the last Wight of the Proms, and tickets will be on sale later this month.
And at Shanklin Theatre in January and February, starting with Friday the 21st of January, 7:30pm, The Magic Drifters. Saturday the 22nd, this starts at 8pm, Edburn. Wednesday the 2nd and Thursday the 3rd of February, 7:30pm, Joel Morris Dance Academy. Sunday, 6th February, this is at 7 o'clock, tribute to John Hannam. Thursday, 10th of February, 7:30pm, Sir Ralph Fiennes. Sunday, the 13th of February, 7:30pm, Cold Place. Thursday, 17th of February, 7:30pm, Mark Watson. And Friday, the 18th of February, 7:30pm, The Rolling Stones Story. Now, Ireland on TV and Kate's new walking series. More detail has been announced about a TV series that is featuring the Isle of Wight coast. The second series of Kate Humble's Coastal Britain started on Channel 5 last Friday. In summer 2020, with the world in the grip of the first COVID wave, Kate Humble embarked on a walking tour of Britain's coastlines. And the time she spent filming Kate Humble's Coastal Britain in the great outdoors reminded her of the country's natural beauty, as well as bringing back plenty of warm childhood memories. The enduring appeal of the coast is enjoying those simple pleasures that we want our children and grandchildren to enjoy, she said in an interview with the Daily Mirror last February. There's something about swimming in a wild place, whether it's the sea, river or a lake, or a pond that connects you with your childhood again. The second run of the show debuted last week with Kate walking 8 more beautiful and historic stretches of the British coast along routes that can be done in a day or weekend. All her walks follow established national trails, including 2 very different coastlines in stunning North Wales, the east and west coasts of Scotland, iconic stretches of Kent and Sussex, and a beautiful wintry walk around the southwestern tip of the Isle of Wight. Along the way, Kate meets the people who live and work nearby, while discovering the history, geology and natural history that have shaped some of the most beautiful coastlines in the world.
And now for some other articles of news. Waiting for life-saving transplant. There are 11 patients awaiting the life-saving gift of an organ transplant on the Isle of Wight, with that number expected to rise. NHS Blood and Transplant is urging people to take a moment to talk with family about their organ donation decision and register their decision to help save lives. Many lives could be saved or significantly improved if a donor can be found. Yet every day across the UK, someone dies in need of an organ transplant. Law around organ donation has now changed to an opt-out system across England, but many families are still not aware and will still be consulted before organ donation. Only 42% of the UK population have registered their decision on the NHS Organ Donor Register, and 37% have told their family.
Plans for a dinosaur theme park in Sandown may now be history, but ambitions for a biosphere in the Bay project have been announced by the Isle of Wight Council. Following news that plans for a theme park on the seafront had been halted, concerns had been raised about Culver Parade's future and the lack of investment in Sandown. Talks between the council and theme park operators Dinosauria had been underway for a couple of years before it was decided the site would be too small. The theme park had been branded a £33 million Disneyland-like investment by the previous Conservative administration. The new Alliance administration, however, ruled out Culver Parade but said other sites, including ones in the Bay Area, are being considered to keep the investment on the island. That decision, however, was criticised by local councillor Ian Ward, who said the significant regeneration needed for Sandown should be a priority. Councillor Ward also said it would be responsible of the council to remove the investment in the area unless they knew what was going to happen to Culver Parade and Dinosaur Isle. Speaking at the Council's Neighbourhoods and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee last week, Councillor Ward asked to know who the authority was talking to about other alternative attractions. Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Member for the Environment and Heritage, said they were looking at a project called Biosphere in the Bay, which had initially been suggested in 2020, but due to COVID had been paused. Councillor Bacon said the vision for the Biosphere in the Bay project includes making the Culver Parade area more attractive to visitors interested in the area's unique landscape, wildlife and history, attracting a greater share of the increasing eco-tourism sector.
New owners for popular farm shop. It's all change at Brownrigg's Farm Shop and Butchery after the former owners stepped down in the new year, and 2 new faces have stepped in. 2 island farmers, Andrew Hodgson and Philip Morris, took over the business on January the 1st and have rebranded it as the Isle of Wight Farm Shop. Andrew farms livestock in Shorewell and is also the owner of Isle of Wight Meat Company. Philip grows vegetables on his farm in Atherfield and runs Farmhouse Fair in Newport. The farm shop near Godsill has already been given a fresh new look, as well as the change of name. Shortly before the takeover, Brownriggs posted on their Facebook page a partnership that we are sure will bring some new and interesting products to the shop. Andrew and Philip are keeping in place all the familiar and friendly team members. Shane will be serving at the meat counter 6 days a week, and Patty will be in the kitchen cooking pies, sausage rolls and a new range of ready meals. Abby, Hannah and Jill will be keeping the shop stocked with all the old favourites and plenty of new exciting products. The former owners, Paul and Sue, decided that after more than 30 years of running butcheries, farmers' markets and the farm shop, that it was time to step back. Home deliveries and click and collect is still available.
Freshwaters Co-op will still become a Tesco and it will contain a post office. The organisations involved in the delayed store changeover have confirmed, though no date has been revealed. Isle of Wight Councillor for Totland and Colwell, Councillor Chris Jarman, said there was overwhelming relief among local people because it had been a concern for so long. The Afton Road shop was due to change hands in September. Months later, in January, it continues to operate as a co-op. In October, planning permission for Tesco's new signs was refused because one was criticised for being too big. Councillor Jarman said there had been significant concern among residents as rumours circulated about the store and its post office's future. This week, a Tesco spokesperson told the county press, "We're excited to open our new store in Freshwater and look forward to welcoming the community." A Southern Co-op spokesperson said, "We continue to remain in partnership with Tesco and will carry on operating the store until completion takes place. The eventual refit will see the store and the post office closed temporarily before both reopen at the same time." Councillor Jarman says he has written confirmation from Tesco's head of service operations that the post office will stay.
The story of the sinking of HMS Gladiator, which featured in our November the 5th edition, brought back memories for 2 islanders. Reg Barry, a former long-serving Seaview and Nettleston councillor who still lives in Nettleston, has a family connection to the terrible tragedy of Fort Victoria in 1908, which resulted in the death of 27 crew. He said, "My grandfather, Sapper John Peacock, was also stationed at Fort Victoria on that terrible day and took part in the rescue of the crew. He was awarded the Royal Humane Society testimonial, which stated, 'It was resolved unanimously that Sapper J. Peacock is justly entitled to the honorary testimonial of this society, inscribed on vellum, which is hereby awarded him, for having on the 25th of April 1908 gone to the rescue of the crew of HMS Gladiator, who were in imminent danger of drowning in the Solent, and whose lives he gallantly assisted to save. He also received a pen and inkstand made from wood of HMS Gladiator, which was presented by the grateful crew. Sapper John Peacock went on to serve during the First World War and was wounded and gassed. After the war, he was posted to India, and the photo in this article was taken when he served with the Bombay sappers and miners. Nick Sewell of Newport also wrote to the county press with an interesting addition to the story of HMS Gladiator. He said, "A curious postscript to the story was that the liner which collided with the Gladiator, the St. Paul, herself capsized 10 years later, almost to the day, on April 28, 1918, while undergoing alterations in New York Harbour. She was refloated and fixed, but St. Paul was eventually scrapped in Germany in 1923.
And another story connected to the First World War. Graves hidden by overgrown brambles and bushes are being uncovered by a team of dedicated volunteers. Friends of Ventnor Cemetery has been set up to help spruce up the huge graveyard in Upper Ventnor. The group was set up by Mark Jeffreys after he was elected onto the Ventnor Town Council in May. He'd noticed areas where graves had become covered up by the unruly foliage, and he felt he needed to do something about it. With a team of volunteers, Mark set to work. They've since uncovered a few surprises. One was a memorial to two young men killed in the First World War, Dudley George, known as Jack, Gilbert, and Phillipson John Gilbert. Mark said, "Wanting to find out more, I put a post on social media asking for information about the men. To my surprise, I had a response from Hong Kong by a lady claiming she believed these boys were related to her. She then put me in contact with her aunt Libby Boxall, who still lives in Ventnor. I then arranged a meeting, and she told me George and Mary Gilbert were her grandparents and the boys would have been her uncles. Many of the family members had been buried in the cemetery, and the family is delighted the graves have been rediscovered. Originally, the family had thought Jack was buried in Ypres in Belgium, and there was no known grave for Philip. The discovery is just one of the 17 graves so far uncovered by the group. There's a Facebook group for people to join, and monthly events to help tidy the cemetery up. On New Year's Eve, it was discovered that the chapel doors had been badly kicked in and leaded windows smashed with rocks. Now, 2 local businesses have stepped in with offers to help pay for repairs, and the police are investigating the crime.
Charlie on road to coach career. A determined young West Wight man who lives with the pain and discomfort of physical disabilities he was born with has taken his first big step towards realising his dream of becoming a football coach. Charlie Woodrow, born with a bilateral talipes commonly known as club foot, a deformity which sees the foot turn downwards and inwards, has faced a number of operations and treatment on both feet since birth. Charlie, 18, a sixth former at St George's School in Newport, was unable to walk until he was age 3 and has had to adapt to growing up with not only his physical challenges but also complex learning difficulties. But Charlie was determined not to let his disabilities hold back his ambition and dream in life, to qualify as an FA football coach. Football mad Charlie of Guyers Road, Freshwater, also enjoyed playing the sport and joined the former Corkhead Strollers Football Club when he was aged 15, playing with success for their under-16s and St George's disability teams. A Chelsea fan through and through, Charlie has climbed the first rung of a ladder he aims to see through into a rewarding football career. Taunton-born Charlie, who came to the island when he was 9 months old, attended Medina House School, Newport, before moving to St George's. It was while at St George's Charlie met Dave Duffy, who was championing disability football on the island in 2017, and he persuaded Charlie to join the increasingly popular Strollers Club. Charlie eventually went on to play for the adult disability team, which had won the Saints Foundation Disability League. Dave said he saw some aptitude for coaching in Charlie and invited him to assist in training and coaching sessions. That gave Charlie the inspiration to become a football coach. Dave continued his support, helping him enrol onto the FA's Introduction to Coaching Football Level 1 course, covering the £250 fee. Charlie went on to pass the course last October, but it was not without its obstacles. His journey was almost over not long after it began, when COVID struck in 2020. Initially run through Hampshire FA, Charlie had completed only part of the course when it was halted by lockdown. By the time he had the opportunity to restart it, Hampshire FA told him they had suspended the course that April and had rescheduled it to start in November 2020. However, when the second lockdown began, the Hampshire FA told Charlie they no longer ran the course, leaving his dreams in tatters. But thanks to his mum Susie, who has supported Charlie throughout his roller coaster life, and Dave, they got him enrolled onto the FA's online Level 1 course. Charlie had one more hoop to jump through. To qualify to join it, he had to complete the BT Playmaker by England Football entry-level coaching course, which introduced him to grassroots football. Charlie said, "It was hard work and a big achievement for me. It was worth all the hard work in the end. Thanks to everyone who has believed in me and stood by me on my football journey over the years. I would like to work for Chelsea one day. That would be my dream come true." The Corkheads Club disbanded in 2018, but he has resumed playing football and helping to coach, with Shanklin-based John's Club, who play in a Hampshire FA Disability League. Dave, who stays in touch with Charlie and Susie, said, "Charlie is flamboyant and an enthusiastic lad who is always willing to learn and soak up knowledge about the game. Charlie is currently looking for a football club to join on the island to coach children."
The 9:45am sailing from Yarmouth to Lymington turned back on Monday when a passenger refused to leave his vehicle. Shortly after leaving the Isle of Wight, White Light turned back. The passenger refused to head to the ferry's passenger deck, the operator said. A spokesperson for Whitelink said the customer refused to get out of his vehicle when asked by a member of the crew and became agitated. The captain decided to return to Yarmouth, where the customer drove off the ferry. White Light departed for Lymington at 9:57. Hampshire Constabulary said its police officers were not called to the West Wight port. Whitelink said customers who need to stay in their cars for health reasons must make a request 48 hours before they travel. Permission is at the master's discretion.
Housing back on Sea Close agenda. Housing is back on the agenda for Sea Close Park in Newport, just 18 months after it was removed to safeguard the park for recreational use. The move has left Ward Councillor Matthew Price furious. "I can't believe it's an option again," he said last night. That was on Monday. The original regeneration plans for Newport Harbour were unveiled over 18 months ago, with 40 houses planned for the entrance to the park off Fairley Road and on the existing Fairley service station site. They sparked a campaign by Councillor Price to throw out the plans, who at the time said it would be absolutely destructive. More than 3,200 people signed his petition and were ultimately successful in getting the authority to do a U-turn. Now the authority has changed its mind again, with the newest master plan coming before Cabinet this week. The new plan still shows housing on Sea Close Gate, but the council says the area is under review, with housing on both sides of the entrance, one side or none at all. The switch, the council say, is due to the COVID pandemic, with the island's housing situation changing and a wider recognition of the urgent need for housing in the right locations. A council spokesman said, following feedback, the authority did not intend to bring back the rejected plans, but review potential for more limited housing. Speaking at Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council meeting, Chris Ashman, the Isle of Wight Council's Regeneration Director, said the housing was being put back to keep all options open. However, Councillor Price thought it would be detrimental to the area. Speaking after the meeting, he said it was outrageous the council would even consider using the park as an option for any kind of development, after previous consultations and turning down a welcomed plan to bring football back to the town. He said, "To suggest things have moved on since then is utterly ridiculous. What hasn't changed is people's opinion for what Seaclose Park should be, which is recreation for every part. In the whole Newport Harbour project, 200 to 300 new housing units are suggested, as well as a hotel, community centre and footbridge over the Medina. The proposals are not set in stone, however, with further rounds of consultation and approval needed."
Yarmouth Eatery looking to expand. A popular Yarmouth restaurant struggling to keep up with demand is looking to build an extension to cater for more people. On the Rocks on Bridge Road has asked the Isle of Wight Council for permission to convert the unoccupied flat on the first floor to a lounge bar. It also seeks to add a first floor extension to add more seating space for the restaurant. In planning documents, the establishment says after major refurbishment last year to improve kitchen facilities and a disabled toilet, it lost table space. It said the trade through the summer had been brisk for locals and tourists, but it was evident the provision in Yarmouth was insufficient for busy holiday times. The documents claim the restaurant requires additional flexible seating capacity, and a first floor extension provides the most appropriate solution. The extension would be finished to match the existing mock Tudor building.
DNA from blood lands man in court. CCTV footage and DNA results were used to pin a man to a burglary at a Newport shop after he smashed his head and a brick against the front door and cut himself gaining entry. Lewis Moreira Morgan of Parkhurst Road appeared before Isle of Wight magistrates via video link. The 21-year-old, currently a serving prisoner, admitted burglary in Newport on July the 27th, 2021. Prosecutor Liz Miller told the court Moreira Morgan had burgled Central Convenience Store on Gunville Road at approximately 12:34 a.m. She said the store had been closed, locked and unoccupied, and CCTV covered the entirety of the offence. Miss Miller said Moreira Morgan initially struck the door with his face, then threw a brick through a glass pane, creating a small hole. The court heard Moreira Morgan then enlarged the hole with his hand and body and climbed through, attempting to wipe the door frame before walking in. He took a number of bottles of vodka, leaving through the hole. Staff attended later that morning and reported the matter to police, with the stolen items valued at £407.98. Blood was found on the floor, on the door and shelving, and DNA results led to Moreira Morgan. Miss Miller told the court Moreira Morgan had been given a 23-month prison term in December for a number of offences, and he was also drunk and on a 2-year conditional discharge at the time of the offence. Jim Osborne, defending, said Moreira Morgan was fully cooperative with police. He said he was very drunk and in a really bad place at the time. Moreira Morgan was given a 10-week prison term consecutive to his current sentence. Compensation and court costs were waived.
Ryde Beach lifeguards have a new toy to play with, an all-terrain vehicle which will be vital in helping the team respond to serious incidents. The lifeguards, part of the Waterside Community Trust charity, took delivery of their new Yamaha ATV last month. It was purchased through a successful grant and will enable Todd Miller and his team to safely tow their inshore rescue boat and quickly respond to emergencies. The lifeguards will also be working in partnership with Ryde Town Council, using the ATV to support its beach operations, assisting in setting up and packing away sun loungers and deck chairs. Both are wishing for a good summer and said they're excited to see a bustling and hustling seafront in 2022. Ryde Mayor Michael Lilly welcomed the new vehicle.
And that's all we have time for today, so it's goodbye from Madeline.
And goodbye from Pauline.
There's no scaffolding news this week. The In Touch programme follows. Audiobooks In Touch. We're discussing 3 audiobooks. Cold in Hand by John Harvey and narrated by Nick Bolton. Lost for Words by Stephanie Butland and narrated by Imogen Church. And The Pigeon Tunnel by John Le Carre and narrated by John Le Carre. Peter reviews the stories and themes and, most importantly, the narration with guests Richard Land and Fiona Dunn.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Tonight, what I hope is going to be a feast for book lovers. This is the latest in our occasional series where we invite avid readers to share a favourite book. And if you think that sounds a lot like Radio 4's A Good Read, a series I love, by the way, I make 2 points. First, we're concentrating on audiobooks. Second, we've been using this format since the 1990s. In any case, what's wrong with copying a good idea? So, to this week's book choosers. First, Richard Lane, former press officer, long-time freelance journalist and from tomorrow, a wine educator with the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. And also Fiona Dunn, a musician, songwriter and currently training as a Methodist preacher. So we have a preacher and a teacher. 2 potential In Touch items in themselves as well, perhaps. But today it's the books we're looking at. Fiona, what have you chosen and why?
I've chosen Lost for Words by Stephanie Butland. She's an author I hadn't heard of, but I often look at the Kindle and Audible deals, and I noticed this title, Lost for Words, and I thought, that sounds intriguing. It's about a woman in her mid-20s. She works in a bookshop and loves books, so it's a great title for a programme about books as well, I thought. I also love it because we're reading an audiobook about this. These bookshops can be accessible to us in the book in a way that they're not in real life, you know. We hear the story from the point of view of the main character. She tells us the story and her life is very complicated. She's called Loveday, which is a Cornish name. And gradually as the book goes on, we find out that she ended up in care. And as the book goes on, we find out why that was. And that explains a lot about why she can be quite prickly. But her perspectives on various things change as the book goes on. And it's just beautiful writing. The clip I've chosen is her talking about the type of customers she gets in the bookshop.
Book inquiries tend to fall into 4 categories. The first is the misremembered/inaccurate. I'd like a copy of Any Which Way But Loose by William Shakespeare, please. Could you mean Much Ado About Nothing? No, I don't think so. It's a play. Could you look in the drama section? The second is the You've Got to Be Kidding Me.
There was a book I read in 1974 or 75. It was a love story set in America, I think, or Australia. Do you have it?
The third is Book Request of the Week. I heard this programme on Radio 4, and it mentioned a book about Pythagoras, or maybe Prometheus. And the fourth is the sort of inquiry you can really get your teeth stuck into because it means tracking down something that's hard to find.
The great thing about this book, as you said, Fiona, is that it absolutely speaks to book lovers. But there is also this question of the kind of the secret that gradually becomes unwound as the book goes on. Because you're now walking the tightrope that we always walk with this kind of programme, which is how much do we tell people and how much do we not give away? So it's always a bit tricky, isn't it? Let's bring in Richard, because as we're going to find out, this book is very different from the one you've chosen. So what did you make of Lost for Words?
I just love this book. I hadn't come across Stephanie Butland before, and neither Imogen Church. By the way, I do apologise, slightly croaky voice today. But what a wonderful book. What a gem of a book. Sometimes when I think about the narration for an audiobook, I kind of dread sometimes an actor taking on the role and sort of enacting it. But with Imogen Church, I feel like we're listening to a film starring Imogen Church as Loveday. Beautiful reader. And I looked her up, I noticed her Instagram handle is Imogen Church Gobshite, which is
brilliant.
Which is rather lovely. But I digress. But the actual book, it's not just a fluffy story about a lovely sounding secondhand bookshop in York with its large armchair blocking the fire escape. And it's remarkable characters like Archie, the owner, Loveday's boss. All the characters, there aren't many characters in the book, but they're so beautifully etched. One of the really clever things about this book is there's so much beauty in the book. There's beauty in the writing, there's beauty in the other characters, not all of them. There's some flawed characters, obviously, as well. But it's Nathan's too good to be true. I must mention Rob, the strange character Rob, pushing flowers through the door of the bookshop.
No, he's been dumped ages ago. Yeah.
Even though he's been dumped by Loveday, there's that whole thing going on. What I think works so well in this book is the brittleness that is Loveday. It's sort of juxtaposition, isn't it, against the kind of fuzziness and the loveliness of Archie and the kind of romantic sound of this secondhand bookshop in York. And I think that makes it work really well. And it creates quite a lot of tension, actually, in each chapter of the book.
We should also say it's very funny. When I was finishing this book at 1:00 this morning, I sat up and laughed out loud, which was she was describing a woman, eccentric dresser. And she said she came in, she was wearing DMs with a 1980s shot silk dress with a tear in one sleeve, sort of Miss Havisham doing the gardening.
It's brilliant,
it's just wonderful writing, wonderful images. And I think for the non-sighted, especially us, obviously, I think it's so vivid. And what I also love is the irony, as you've mentioned, Fiona, that we're talking about a bookshop and physical books, the feel and smell of books. And here we are listening to it in an audiobook. And I feel sorry for people who read this book who don't listen to Imogen Church, because Imogen is so amazing.
It's also emotional. A good book will make you laugh and make you cry. And this book certainly made me cry in places. I mean, there are places where she talks about, for example, a poetry book that brings back memories of her childhood before everything went wrong. And she says of these memories, they catch you, paper cuts across the heart.
Okay, I have to stop you there because we won't get time for the other two books. It's time for my choice. My choice is not so much one book, although I have chosen one, but it's a big hurrah for a crime fiction series, which it seems to me has gone under the radar. I'm sure real crime fiction aficionados know of John Harvey's Resnick books, but his copper, his policeman, isn't mentioned in the same breath as Rankin's Rebus, Rendell's Wexford, P.D. James's Dalgleish, Morse. I could go on. And I think that John Harvey should be. It's hopeless to try and summarise a crime book without doling out loads of spoilers. I'm not even going to attempt that, except to say that Charlie Resnick's beat is Nottingham. Cold in Hand, which is the one I've chosen, deals with youth gang warfare there, sadly still very much on the news agenda. But what really appeals to me about this series is Resnick himself and all the things that he isn't. And in a way, what he's not is contained in this short extract.
For several minutes they ate in silence. Chet Baker faded into something more sprightly. Bob Brookmeyer and Jimmy Jufra playing Louisiana, an old favourite Resnick hadn't listened to in years. The youngest of the cats was hovering hopefully beneath the table, rubbing its back from time to time against one of the legs. "This is good," Resnick said, indicating his plate. "Don't sound so surprised." I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." He grinned. "I'm sorry." "So you should be."
beautifully read there by Nick Bolton. So, Resnick is not a serial drinker, he's not a serial womaniser, he's in a stable relationship, he's a jazz lover, he's a cat lover. I just think Harvey's books are beautifully plotted, they're real, they have a sense of place, and it's just a shame that only a handful of the 12 of the Resnick novels are on audiobook. So, Richard, what did you think? Have I got John Harvey a new fan?
I liked it to a degree. I'm not quite as enthusiastic as you, Peter. I mean, it's not a genre I often immerse myself in, so that's probably my fault. But I did enjoy it the longer the book went on. And certainly Resnick, as you've indicated, is low key. And perhaps I wanted a bit more of Resnick at the beginning of the book. But then, as you said, this is a series. So if you're reading the series, by the time you've got to this one, you know pretty well who Resnick is. I just felt, listening for the first time, I needed to get to know him a bit better. It's interesting because the female characters, I thought, were very much stronger in a way, or certainly more clearly defined, perhaps, than Resnick. There's an ambiguity about Resnick. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but plot-wise and structure-wise and pace-wise, yes, you do go through the gears. I just felt initially as though I was watching a very long, or listening to a very long episode of Line of Duty to begin with. Overall, I did enjoy it, but it took me a little while to get going.
Fiona, what about you?
Oh, I loved it. But then I love thrillers and police books and things like that anyway. And it turned out I had actually heard another book from this series on the radio a few years ago. They played it on, I think it was called BBC 7 back then. It's Radio 4 Extra now. And they had a great theme tune that I remember, and it went 10 more wasted years, because it was called Wasted Years, and it was lovely. If I'd known then that this was a series, I'd have looked for them ages ago. So I was really happy when you recommended this book.
Right, that's my frustration. You know, we've had Rebus, we've had Morse, we've had Wexford, they've all had big TV series, and I just think that this is in the same class. It's the understatedness that I absolutely like about it.
Yes. Something horrible happens, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that something horrible happens partway through this book. And Resnick cries. He's not one of these, you know, stone male characters who doesn't feel like you get in some of these books. He's a normal person.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, a bit of a tedious technical point, but again, this is one of the frustrations of audiobooks sometimes. The navigation on this book is not easy on Audible. You know, the chapter skip when you're listening don't match the chapters in the book. If you do lose your place and you want to chapter flick back using the audio controls on the Audible app, they're out of sync with the actual chapters, and that's just something annoying.
We found that when we were trying to find the right clip to play, how difficult it was. So I think you make a very fair point. Richard, I'm going to stay with you for your own book, your own selection. Now, you've chosen a famous author, John le Carré, but not one of his spy novels. So tell us more. Tell us what you've chosen and why.
I've chosen The Pigeon Tunnel, Stories of My Life, written and read, thank goodness, I'll explain why in a moment, by John le Carré. And I only started reading le Carré 4 years ago, and I've only read 6 or 7 out of his 30 or 40 titles. So I'm not a le Carré expert. But what I loved about this book, it was just a real treat, because he has had a most extraordinary life. It's not an ordinary autobiography that starts at the beginning and ends at the end. It's really a collection of short stories, novellas, if you like, of his life. He's also incredibly honest. He's narrating this book at the age of 84, a couple of years before he dies. And he says, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, because it's what is pure memory. It's so difficult to know whether what you're saying actually happened or not. So he's upfront about that, but he certainly hasn't deliberately invented things. But also, this was the guy, remember, who ran away from school to get away from his father. He was courted and recruited into the intelligence service in the sort of late 50s, early 1960s. He then left the intelligence service to become an author, and became a successful author because of The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, 1963. So he became successful quite early on. Maybe 10 years later, when he became really, really famous again with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And that's the turning point in his life. Actually, from that point on, he became an adventurer, which often took him into war zones and all the rest of it. And this links to the little clip we've got to hear, because there are 4 extraordinary consecutive chapters in the middle of his book, where he is based in Beirut in the early 1980s with the Israel-Lebanon war going on. And he's based there because he wants to know what it's like, both from the Palestinian kind of Arabic perspective, and he also crosses over into Israel for the kind of Israel-Jewish perspective. And when he's in Beirut, he stays in the Commodore Hotel in Beirut, where all the hacks and journalists and war kind of people hang out. And as the clip's about to tell us, there's one very important person in charge of the hotel.
Its most revered resident was an elderly parrot named Coco, that ruled over the cellar bar with a rod of iron. As the techniques of urban warfare became ever more sophisticated, from semi-automatic to rocket-propelled, from light to medium, or whatever the correct vocabulary is, so Coco updated his repertoire of battle sounds to a point where the uninitiated guest grazing at the bar would be roused by the whoosh of an incoming missile and a shriek of, "Hit the deck, dumb bastard! Get your ass down now!" And nothing better pleased the war-weary hacks returning from another hellish day in paradise than the sight of some poor neophyte disappearing under a table while they go on sipping nonchalantly at their mahogany whiskies.
It's such a great mental picture, isn't it? You can actually hear it. Before you come back, Richard, I want to bring Fiona in at this point because I love this book because I'd read a lot of John le Carré. And I don't know whether you have, Fiona, so I wondered what you made of it.
More, I've heard dramas or watched dramas. There was a Radio 4 series of all the Smiley books, which I remember getting gripped by. And things like The Night Manager were on the telly. At the beginning, I was struggling with it a bit, but as it went on, I couldn't put it down. And I do love that bit about the parrot. It's fantastic. And it's interesting that all the clips we've chosen are quite funny, I think. But
They're
it's
the ones
amazing.
That stay with you, aren't they?
I think they're either the funny ones or the really moving ones, yeah. I find it really interesting, but it's good in some ways in that you can dip in and out of it because they're short stories, as Richard said. But at the start, I was struggling with that a bit. There wasn't an impetus to go, oh, what's going to happen next? Because it would be a different story, if that makes sense. And it's actually made me want to get some of the other novels, actually, and read them.
Well, that's the idea of this programme, or part of the idea of this programme. Richard, I loved it because I've read quite a lot, probably read actually more than you have. And it unfolds so many things in the novels that I didn't understand. But there's an interesting thing about le Carré, which is that it seems he almost can't not write like a Russian doll, even when he's writing fact. You know, you never know quite what you're reading. You never know quite where it's going to go. And there's always a plot within a plot within a plot, even when he's talking about his own life. Did you find that?
Absolutely, Peter, because I read your book and I read Fiona's book more recently because I thought I knew this book. So I quickly reread this book to remind myself. And I thought I was almost reading another book because le Carré is an exquisite writer. His concision is unbelievable, but it's dense. Le Carré's writing is dense. So it's easy to miss stuff, isn't it? What I really, really love about it most of all is it's a very human book. He doesn't set out to be some sort of, huge personality or celebrity. He talks about his failings as a father and as a husband and how difficult he can be and his memory and all the rest of it. But what he is in search of all the time is truth. And there's this real kind of, I suppose, pathos with le Carré. There's integrity. And I think it's so important that we are listening to his book read by him because his beautiful elderly voice gives it an extra note of integrity, not that it really needed it.
So the idea of the author reading the book, that works for you?
In this case.
Yeah. And you, Fiona?
Yes, it worked definitely for me, John le Carré reading it. But I wouldn't say that means authors should always read their own book. Because some authors are better at that than others.
I'll tell you a funny story about this very quickly because we're almost have to end. But actually about 20 years ago, I think it must have been, I went to interview him about exactly this point. Should you read your own book? And actually, he was in real doubt about whether he should or whether he shouldn't. In this one, The Pigeon Tunnel, I think he's much more convincing. And it is his age, I think, and the gravitas in the voice that really makes it work. So that's it. We have been talking about The Pigeon Tunnel by John le Carré. We've been talking about Cold in Hand by John Harvey. And we've been talking about Lost for Words by Stephanie Buckland. And that's it for today. Many thanks to Fiona Dunn and Richard Lane for steering us, me at least, to books that I might never have read otherwise. And we welcome your picks of audiobooks that you've particularly enjoyed from whatever source you choose. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, or you can go to our website bbc.co.uk/in touch, from where you can download tonight's and previous edition of the programme and get links to the 3 books that we've mentioned. From me, Peter Wight, producer Beth Hemmings, and studio managers Mike Smith and Jonathan Esp, goodbye.